So let's continue down this path of deconstructing the thought process itself, because it's such a paradox. On the one hand, thinking and overthinking are the major source of our suffering, modern suffering at least. And as Seneca put it, we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. And if you go far enough back into our past, we suffered more in reality than in imagination. And so here we are suffering from our imagination, but at the same time, in these videos, we've been deconstructing the thought process itself, showing it's an illusion. It doesn't even exist. It's not actually what we think it is, or maybe it is only what we think it is. But that doesn't mean it doesn't cause suffering. Illusions can cause all kinds of strange things to happen in the world, because anything believed to be true can be true in its consequences. So for the ancient philosophers, they considered logic to be the science of thinking. And so they were obsessed with trying to focus solely on thinking itself and test whether it could lead to new truths. In other words, you didn't have to go out and experience the world. You could just think. Pure rationalism at its finest. And rationalism alone will discover all the truths of reality. And so this fell completely flat, and it just didn't work. And that's what I'm going to show you in this video. We'll have a couple exercises. So let's start with a really simple formal logic problem. And formal logic, of course, is concerned with the form. So it really was so against the content, which is to say anything that we experience in the real world, or you could say is anything we're conscious of, and it wanted to be so abstract that it was devoid of all content and only consisted of thought forms. And this is, so you might remember some of these, like, oh, here's one. Some A or B, some B or C, therefore, and this conclusion means we necessarily can conclude this. It's a new truth just by thinking. Therefore, some A or C. So let me read that one more time, because I want you to really consider and think this through. Some A or B, some B or C, therefore some A or C. Now, when I would do this in the classroom, 70% of people thought it was valid, which is to say it's truthful. It's a new truth. It's an absolute truth that we can learn without getting up and leaving our chair. We can just think about it. Well, in spite of most people thinking it's valid, all we have to do to show that it's not valid is to bring in conscious experience, things that we could be conscious of, things that we have experience with, things from, quote, the real world. And so let's bring in some real world things instead of A's and B's. So some tall people are Democrats. Some Democrats are short. Therefore, some tall people are short. And so that shows you that while you could fill it in with other things that might work, to be valid, it has to always work. And that's what they were looking for, these new truths that would always work. And by putting tall and Democrats and short people, clearly tall people can't be short. That would be really illogical, to say the least. So let's get, here's another one. This was from Dr. Seuss. And of course, if thinking had any value to it at all, we should be able to think about these forms, and it should feel very natural. But the problem is they'd feel very unnatural. In fact, the only way we can make them feel natural is when we bring in concrete experience, which is to say, things that we've been conscious of. Okay, so Dr. Seuss, ready to go. Here's another argument, and the form is what's going to be important here. No Gox box when in purple socks. Jocks is a Gox wearing purple socks. Therefore, Jocks does not now box. Okay, is that valid or not valid? Well, your thinking mind is showing its inability. You're kind of piercing through the illusion of thought, because your thinking mind is lost. And it's lost because it's not very good at any of this stuff because it doesn't even exist. What it needs is it needs concrete experience. So let's give some concrete experience. I'm not going to change the form of that argument at all. The form is exactly the same. But what I'm going to bring in are things that you've been consciously experienced, things that you're consciously familiar with, things in the concrete real world. So now let's see if we can assess the validity of this argument. No cars run when they're out of fuel. My car is out of fuel. Therefore, my car does not now run. And even if you've never been in that exact situation, you've had so many conscious experiences with cars and whether they have fuel and maybe you have ran out of fuel. And so all this is experience-based. And so the way you're able to assess the validity is entirely dependent on whether or not you've had conscious experience. So what this shows is that thought alone it masquerades itself as being very, very powerful. And so, of course, humans, if you look us up in the dictionary, we are rational, logical creatures. That defines our species. But when you really put it to the test, the only stuff that we seem to be really good at in terms of finding the truth are those things that have been experienced directly, which is to say, it's all consciousness. It's all direct conscious experiences. And without direct conscious experiences, the thinking mind is absolutely in the dark.